What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. This is the Big 12 College Football Betting Preview Part 1. I'm Stuckey. Joining me today, as always, my fellow BBOC co-host, Collin Wilson. Split this up into two parts. Part 1 usually takes a little longer for the top team, so we'll see how many we get through. And then Part 2 will cover the rest. At the end of Part 2, as always, we'll cover our picks for the Big 12 and sum up our favorite futures, long shots, win totals, all that good stuff. Before we dive into the Big 12, a couple of news-related pieces for the SEC. We did our SEC podcast yesterday. Yeah. Check out both of those parts. Gooseby, we hyped him up, and he gets hurt, but it looks like it's not season-ending.
Bone bruise,
which could be like it's different for everyone. But I mean, he could miss the Ohio State game. We'll see how serious it is. There'll be more info to come there. But if that happened, like, you'd have to kick Baker back out to guard, Siani probably to left tackle. So they would definitely have a trickle-down effect on the offensive line. So we'll see how that plays out. And then I failed to mention, I didn't know how serious it was. I was told it wasn't that serious, but we'll see. Oklahoma's projected starting center got hurt in the scrimmage. And I'm not sure how long he's out for, but that could have an impact. And Oklahoma has a very tough schedule early on. He was rolled up on teammates. They thought initially it could be season ending, but there was a more encouraging report. Looks like it's sprained MCL. So 4 to 6 weeks from Saturday is when he'll probably be out. So there is an outside chance he could be back for the Michigan game. So we'll see. So a couple of pieces of news. Want to always keep you guys up to date on the SEC. But let's dive into the Big 12. Texas Tech is the overwhelming favorite. They're odds-on favorite to win the conference again. They dominated the league last year. Nobody even sniffed them. Had some off-season drama with Brendan Sorsby, who's no longer with the team. They paid, $4 or $5 million with him. But it looks like Will Hammond is trending in the right direction to be healthy for the start of the season. And the team is loaded. Before we dive in, we'll start with the Red Raiders. Summing up kind of the high level of the conference. Mentioned Texas Tech's the overwhelming favorite. And then you have 4 new head coaches. Utah, Whittingham's no longer there. He's in Michigan. Oklahoma State, interesting team. Derek Morris brings basically the boys from Denton north to Stillwater. Iowa State, Jimmy Rogers, after Matt Campbell left and basically took the entire team to Happy Valley. And then Kansas State, Colin Klein comes over from Texas A&M and takes over. Half the league has new offensive coordinators. Half the league has new defensive coordinators. A lot of those are from the teams with new head coaches, obviously. And then despite the fact that there's 11 projected new starting quarterbacks, there's a lot of quarterback certainty as of this moment. It looks like there's only one pending quarterback battle, and that's it in Lawrence with Kansas, which we'll get to. So we pretty much know who all the starting quarterbacks are going to be, barring injuries. So let's dive right into the top of the Big 12. We'll start with Texas Tech. The odds-on favorite to win the conference. Win total, you can go over 10.5, like minus 250. Or you can go over 11.5 plus 184 if you think they go undefeated. Or you can go under 11.5 and pay for that as well. This is a team that will have a new starting quarterback, but will haven't got some experience last year. And they are pretty loaded. I mean, they have money. So the class coming in, the transfer portal freshmen, arguably top 10 in the country. They are top 15 in returning production. And you look across the roster and, they did lose. It was a super talented team last year. So they had 3 offensive players drafted, but they go to the portal and they address some of their needs. On the defensive side of the ball, it's the same story. Now, it's going to be a little tougher, right? You lose Bailey as a top 2 pick. You lose Height, who was the 3rd-round pick. You lose Hunter in the middle. I thought was like supremely underrated. He went in the 2nd round. And then you lose, Jacob Rodriguez, who just, his presence and impact can't be understated. He goes in the second round at linebacker. And then Wisniewski at safety, he gets drafted in the 7th round as well. But they go to the portal because they have tons of money. You get Austin Romaine from Kansas State to replace Rodriguez. You bring in a lot of defensive ends to replace that production, but you're really counting on White from San Diego State, who was super productive, and Adam Trick, who was a pressure monster from Miami, Ohio. You bring in Ibaragba from Wake Forest, who showed a lot of potential. A couple guys from the MAC as well for depth pieces. Butler from Washington. So it's kind of like power numbers, but they definitely brought in 2 of the best edge rushers. I don't think they're going to be as good up front, and I don't think that Romaine is going to replace Rodriguez's impact, but the drop-off isn't going to be huge. Although I will say, if the drop-off is a little more significant than I would have expected, or that I will expect, then the secondary might suffer, because the secondary is super experienced. They basically bring everyone back except Wisniewski, and that's a position to watch, because that's like the one homegrown position. It's a bunch of sophomores battling for that safety spot that Wisniewski, who was played in college football for 6 years, manned. So that's a position to watch. On the defensive line, you do have Cofield coming back, but he had tore his Achilles, so we'll see when he can come back. So it's a brand new front defensive line, portal heavy at linebacker and defensive tackle and defensive end, but the outside of Roberts at linebacker, but the secondary, ton of experience. But do they fall off? Because last year they didn't have to do much, because you snap the ball against Texas Tech and 17 guys are jumping on the quarterback. What are you seeing with Texas Tech this year? I will also mention the offensive line should be dominant. You get all your backs back. Could they just run through the Big 12 without even attempting a pass? Just line up and run it down everyone's throat with this backfield?
That'd be a heck of a way to keep Hammond's passing game off tape whenever he comes back. Look, I think first you start with the number, right? Because Brennan Sorsby, there's a lot of, I would say, a lot of people out there saying, how many power rating points do you add or take away? Because he was back, he was off. And so here I am adjusting power ratings somewhere around 5 points, because I didn't think the drop off to Will Hammond was that bad considering the numbers that he has put up before. But it did drop their win total for me from 11.2 down to 10.7. I think from a Big 12 perspective, it's really no change. I mean, you still have Sheil Wood as defensive coordinator, calling the best defensive line, the best linebacking unit, and one of the best secondaries in the conference, Big 12 itself. Nobody else is playing defense at this level, at all 3 levels. And I think that's the calling card. That's what got them there last year, and that's what's going to get them there this year. And then who knows, that oil money will come in. They'll go after the biggest quarterback name in the portal again, and they will continue to try to make a scene at the national level. So really the question to me, did they drop off in Big 12 play? No, they won't. Have they made any progress and advancing nationally, as in we got blanked by Oregon? I don't think they've made any progress whatsoever. To me, I think the ceiling is exactly where they ended last year. I think the floor is exactly where they ended last year. When you look at Will Hammond, 9 big-time throws, turnover-worthy plays in 2 years, 190 dropback. He has a little bit of experience, but he's questionable off the ACL. They don't know if he's going to play. I doubt he plays Abilene Christian. I doubt he plays Oregon State, if you want me to be honest. They can just line up and run the ball because that team is horrific. So they're going to bring him back at his own time whenever he wants to come back. But, this defense is the calling card. I don't know how you play anything. The schedule needs to be talked about too.
The schedule's a joke. No BYU, no Utah, and all their toughest games are at home. Arizona, Houston, and TCU, arguably the easiest Power 4 schedule.
The closest game I have is Cincinnati, and it's still like 10 points.
Yeah, there's a chance that they're double-digit favorites in every single game.
Yes, and so I'm not saying I love this play and I have a lot of money behind it, but you have to have a Texas Tech plus 100 in your back pocket. Because
if you think who are two teams,
are they finishing third in this conference? No.
Yeah, and then you have a ticket where they're going to be, they could be set probably as of right now. You would
at least 7.
They're 7+ point favorites.
At least 7. Now there's someone's going to rise and someone's going to come up, but I'm going to say this right now: we haven't got to them yet. Has BYU figured out how to beat Texas Tech? They got they got bombed last year twice. They only scored it to Bear Bachmeyer and LJ Martin. You could say LJ Martin was hurt, whatever, or Bear Bachmeyer was a freshman. What was the final score there? 29-7, 34-7 in 2 games against them?
Could have been worse in each game.
Yeah. And has BYU closed the gap? I don't think so. I think they're going to do the same thing they did last year, right? So who else are you going to take in this conference to win the Big 12? I got an idea that we'll get to with the team, but I don't know how you're not playing Texas Tech and not having a Big 12 ticket in your back pocket. If you want to call it a half unit or you're playing 2 units and 1 on Texas Tech, that's how you have to play this. From a national level, Stuck, I don't think you play them at all. I think they're going to get to the playoff, and a team like Oregon's going to blank them again.
Yeah, where does this go wrong for Texas Tech? Because Texas Tech has ruined the Big 12, by the way. Put Texas Tech in the Big 10 or the SEC. The Big 12 used to be fun, and we used to talk about the chaos, and now there's a team that's odds-on favorite. Get this shit out of here.
Arizona State was predicted dead last and won the conference a couple of years ago. That's why I love doing this podcast, because you can't say anything wrong.
Yeah. So how does it go wrong for Texas Tech? Well, Hammond gets hurt, and then you have Kirk Francis as your quarterback. But still, they should just be able to run it on everyone.
Yep.
Like, their guards aren't great. Like, they lost both their guards. But they brought in Church from Louisville. He's okay. High floors. Zambrano. But Jados wasn't good for them. So, like, I don't know. They don't have, like, a star receiver, but they have a bunch of really solid ones that come from Power 4 ranks. Simmons from Auburn, Johnson from Pitt. They also brought in Lee from Liberty, Jones from Alabama State. So there's like a good stable there. We'll see if anyone can step up, because they did lose 2 receivers in the first 5 rounds of the draft, in Douglas and Virgil. The way that it goes on defensively, I do think there'll be a drop-off, which is why you said you dropped them 4 or 5 points. I think I'm in the same neighborhood. Because the defensive line, it's almost impossible for them to be as dominant as they were. They lost 7 to the NFL, and their defensive line was unbelievable. They allowed 2.2 yards per carry and had 41 sacks. And, they lose all 4 of their defensive linemen to the NFL. And then, you also lose a corner, a linebacker, and a safety. So there could be a drop-off of that safety spot. They're not getting as much pressure. And then that secondary, which people have questions about, they just didn't really ever get tested because the defensive line was so dominant. So, yeah, that's how, they drop a little bit more than I might even be projecting. But still, they would be massive favorites in every single game, and still should probably get there if Kirk Francis was their quarterback.
I'm not going to say who the teams are, but I think there's only 3 teams on this schedule that can even play mediocre at defensive line to try to stop their rush. Like, I'm talking from a pure defensive line ability to stop Texas Tech and make them go 3 and out. I think there's only 3 teams that can have success on a couple drives. But there's a couple of passing teams on the schedule that can get into their secondary. And those games, a little bit more interesting to me, but we're going to cover those.
We'll try to find a sleeper. I do have a sleeper. I'm not in love with it.
Are we on the same one? Did you check the script?
I did not. I decided to go into this one blind. All right, let's move on to the BYU Cougars. Win total for BYU is over 8.5, minus 150-ish, so heavily juiced to the over. BYU is sitting at around 5-1 to win the conference. Last year, they went 11-1, and in the regular season, 12-2 overall, because they lost twice. They got dominated by Texas Tech. Bear Bachmeyer is back for his sophomore season, really flashed as a freshman. This team has a lot of talent. I mean, if you go down the list of potential guys who could be drafted, I'm looking at maybe 8 or 9.
I was shocked LJ Martin came back.
Yeah, LJ Martin comes back. The biggest question on the team by far is wide receiver, because you lose your 2 best by far, and Parker Kingston gets kicked off the team. That was a big loss. So now you're relying on, JoJo Phillips, Kyle Casper. Now you do bring in, what's that?
Tiger Bachmeyer.
Now you do bring in a pair of really good tight ends in Salapaga from Oregon and Lyons from USC. So you might see some more 2 tight end sets from Aaron Roderick, who's just a really underrated and great offensive coordinator, just always gets the best out of his teams. You have 4 offensive linemen that started last year returning. The question is at left tackle. it looks like it could be Packy Finau, who he has a lot of potential. There's also a Latu Finau, who's a redshirt freshman who could get that position. The Finau, I think, is a popular name in Tonga. I think it means like strong or something. But Packy Finau, if he hits, here's the thing. He played for Washington last year. I think he mainly played guard. He did play one game at tackle, super young. He got destroyed, absolutely destroyed in his one game. I think it was at Wisconsin. So, but we'll see. But he was a redshirt freshman. If they hit that left tackle, then this offensive line is really good. They have the tight ends. They have Martin at running back. They have Bachmeier. The question is really just, can someone step up at wide receiver for this passing attack? And then the defense is pretty loaded, right? You have Glasgow back at linebacker. You lose your other linebacker. You bring in Uluave, who I love, from Cal. You have two really, really good defensive backs in Johnson, who could get drafted at corner, and then Satuala at safety. Although he's dealing with an injury, I think he's going to be okay, but it's worth mentioning he's an absolute stud. So there, and then the young defensive linemen last year who played as freshmen. I think you're going to get more of a pass rush this year. So this defense has a lot of potential as well. The one thing I would worry about with this team, and maybe it's just never going to happen, is does the four-leaf clover ever, does the horseshoe ever fall out of their ass? I mean, over the past 2 years, they're 8-2 in one possession games. They have a plus 16 turnover margin. They're 36 of 54 on fourth downs. I mean, even look at last year, like some of their like they were fairly fortunate in some games. I mean, they beat Utah. They were outgained by 100 yards. Utah went 1 of 5 on fourth down. ECU was dead even in yardage. Iowa State outgained them by 85, and they turned it over a million times. Cincinnati was dead even in yardage. Those 4 games, and not to mention they went 4-0 one possession games, but those 4 games, which weren't all one possession, those teams went 6 for 15 on fourth down. They were -9 in turnover margin. So like BYU, for my metrics, was one of the luckiest teams in the country last year. But there's a lot to like about this roster. What are you seeing with the Cougs?
I know you say lucky, but when you describe those stats, which you and I look at box scores Sunday mornings and get some great voicemails, we call those luck box wins, right? But that really kind of describes a Jay Hill defense. Like even at Weber, everywhere that he's been, they always win the turnover battle. You know, at Kalani Sitake, they practice loose balls on the field. You know, they have drills for that. They practice third and fourth down and short. They practice those things. And so even though the question is does that come to an end? I don't think so. Even with Kelly Papinga being promoted to defensive coordinator, I mean, he's been on staff. They're going to follow what Jay Hill was doing. I'm not sure if what you and I call luck box scores is going to play out here, because that's just kind of what BYU is. LJ Martin coming back is huge for this offense because it gives Bear Bachmeier the chance to surprise people with the run if you're paying attention too much to LJ Martin. 3.8 yards after first contact. He forced 56 missed tackles last year. Absolute force on the offensive side. And plus, this is, I think, the number 1 offensive line in the conference and the number 2 defensive line in the conference. I mean, these guys can battle it out in the trench. They, for some reason, just can't get it figured out against Texas Tech. Now, BYU off a bye at TCU, we'll get there. It could be a knockout game for that second shot, Big 12 championship game. Notre Dame will play their 7th game in Provo before a needed bye week. Now, you and I will cover Notre Dame on the ACC podcast, but that's Notre Dame's 7th straight game, and it's in Provo. They're going to make that thing probably 9 p.m., and it's going to be fire. It's going to be one of the best games of the season. Holy War is going to be a coin flip. You know, those 3 games are the only teams that can compete in the trench with BYU. Cincinnati's offensive line is great, but their defensive line is horrific. And you have to shut down Bear Bachmeier and LJ Martin to have a chance against this team. So for me, there's only 3 teams that could potentially beat them. And BYU sets up nice for a couple upsets. I want BYU make the playoff plus 330. I've already bet it, and it's going in the app after the podcast.
I will say, you mentioned the defensive line. They get Justin Kirkland back, too, the big nose who was a transfer from Oklahoma State who was out for the year. That's good news because Tanavasu now can play his like more natural position. And then some of their younger guys can step up. So the defensive line could have more juice. I like their linebackers. And then, you bring both corners back. Satuala is a star at safety. And then Damuni has experience too at safety. So like there's a lot of experience with this team. And I mean, you look at their schedule, the things that there are to like about it. No Texas Tech.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good thing. They do go to Utah, but they only have one back-to-back road trip, and there's a bye in between.
There's no Houston.
There's no Houston. They get 7 home games for the second time in school history.
Yep.
And the travel is pretty manageable. I mean, you're going to Kansas. They go to Utah, TCU, and Colorado State.
Bounce house off a bye. Bounce house off a bye. Yeah.
Yeah, after Notre Dame, before Arizona State, I have that game circled. I'll tell you that.
I might have to play that to protect a playoff bet. If they somehow miraculously pull off an upset against Notre Dame, you're gonna have to hit UCF the next week in the bounce house, especially if they make that game at night.
Yep. All right, let's move on to for what it's worth. I project BYU 8-9-6, and I project Texas Tech 10-6-5. All right, let's move on to Utah. Utah, no more Kyle Whittingham, which is going to be weird not to see him on the sidelines. Mm-hmm. Their win total over 8.5, juiced to the over, right around the same price as BYU. They are 9-1 to win the conference. Whittingham leaves, so he takes some players with him to Michigan. Some guys on the defensive end that were pretty important. Daly, Snowden. He also brings a defensive tackle, wide receiver / hybrid tight end Buchanan. So a couple guys left in that route, and then they lost a lot of guys on the offensive line. So you do bring your quarterback and your backup quarterback back in Bird Ficklin. But you have your
who might be as electric as Devin Dampier.
Yeah. So, and you have a good insurance if one of them goes down or one of them's hurt for a little bit. But the biggest question
can't avoid contact.
Yeah. So the biggest question on this team, there's a couple, but we'll start on the offensive side. It's because first you're gonna have a new offensive coordinator coming in from Utah State, and he brings his leading receiver in Brendan Pagan, who I think can play, but we'll see how he plays when he has to step up in competition. The biggest question on this team by far is the offensive line. So, this offensive line.
Every position, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, they lose all 5 offensive linemen, and 4 of them are now on NFL rosters. 2 of them got drafted in the first round. Now, who's going to start in their place? It's very interesting to project this because there's 4 guys who are all seniors or grad seniors who played last year, but most of them played in the bowl game because Utah starters sat out, and they played like 150 to 200 snaps. So they've been waiting. They've been with the program for a while. New offensive line coach, who they're pretty high on. But so you have these 4 guys who have been with the program for 4 years that are seniors, that are experienced, that are probably hungry, but they're replacing 4 guys who are now in the NFL, including 2 first-round draft picks at tackles. Your other tackle is probably going to be Jefferson, who is, I believe, a Montana State transfer. I will say he played Oregon last year, and now it's Oregon, but he couldn't be on the field. So I'll just throw that out there. It was horrifying. I went back and watched some of it. So the defensive line also is a question mark. But if now you have a mobile quarterback, which does help. And you have your running back, and I believe they might get their short yardage guy back due to the new court rolling. But there were major questions on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. I mean, this Utah run defense last year was historically bad. Now the secondary has some pretty confident in their secondary with the likes of Evans and Richie and company, but I have questions on the rest of this roster. And I think that some of the teams have started to figure out Scally a little bit, and he's not going to be controlling the D as much. He did so much in terms of adjustments and late game clock calls and confusing opposing quarterbacks. And that defense just wasn't the same last year. I mean, you go back and watch that Kansas State game. Kansas State was just handing it off and running for a touchdown like every other play. It was insane. What are you seeing with the Utes this year? Over 8.5, minus 150.
I mean, if they've figured out the offense of Beck, then they're going to know this offense because Kevin McGivern has said that he wants to run the heavy RPO and keep it going from what they've done in the past. So It's hard to run that. Listen, we start off against Idaho, and then we have Arkansas. Arkansas does have one guy on the defensive line that can create pressure and do a little havoc and do it. And they do have some thick guys at the defensive interior. So I'm not sure this is as much of a slam dunk as people think it's going to be when Utah takes on Arkansas and that defensive line. There is at least not bottom of the SEC type defensive line. So we'll see what the Utah offensive line has right there. Now, Devin Dampier was dealing with all kinds of injury last year, right? He's playing through a double sports hernia, an ankle injury, still had 34 all-purpose TDs, not as much as what he had when he transferred in, but still putting up those kinds of numbers with those kinds of injuries are really, really impressive. 5 Big 12 road games here. This is not.
This is one of the best home field advantages in all of college football.
Yeah. And the first 2 road trips come against Iowa State and Colorado, 2 teams that have massive struggles on the defensive line. That's good for the Utah offensive line. There is time for them to mature a little bit and get some snaps under their belt with those 2 starts in conference play. So the question is, does this get the Utes trenched to the second half of the season with enough experience? There's some tough home games on here. A night slot at Rice Eccles would help against Houston. There's a 5-game stretch where it's really going to decide everything. Short faves at Cincy, coin flip against BYU, short faves at Arizona. They're going to go see Jaden Craig with TCU and then on back-to-back travel. There's some tough little angles on this schedule. I make this 9.6. I should be going over 8.5 with all that, but with the heavy juice and the turnover on this offensive line and the potential that Arkansas could surprise in this new offensive line, I'm staying off of this, even though I projected 9.6.
Well, you're way higher than me. I'm at 8.45. I lean under. I'm afraid of just the schedule, because, Cincy could be. If Cincy has a bad year, they could just be on quit watch by then, and that's one of your toughest road games. But yeah, they start Idaho, Arkansas, Utah State at home. Then they go to Iowa State, who's the worst Power 4 team. We'll get to them. And then they host Kansas, who's a disaster. So, and then they're at Colorado. And then you host Houston, one of the best home field advantages in all of college football. So, and then you're at Cincy. And then you host BYU. They could be 8-0, 9-0. Even though I don't like a lot about their team just because of the schedule.
Well, if BYU,
then you host West Virginia at the end of the year.
I was going to say is if BYU is able to run all over Utah on November 7th, watch out, because West Virginia, that's all Rich Rod wants to do is run the ball, and that game's on a Friday after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this team takes a step back. Even if you look at last year, they went 11-2.
Yeah,
they beat UCLA with Deshaun Foster, Cal Poly, Wyoming. These are teams that can't even dream of a first down. West Virginia when Wilkins was starting. Arizona State when Jeff Sims was starting. Colorado when Staub started. They beat Cincy. That was a good win. They beat Baylor when they gave up 580 yards. They beat K-State when they gave up 580 yards. They beat Kansas when they gave up 480 yards. And then they beat Nebraska with Latif. In the bowl game. They didn't face Arizona. They didn't face Houston. They didn't face Iowa State. They didn't face TCU. They didn't face Arizona State with Leavitt. They got trucked by Texas Tech and lost to BYU. They won 11 games, but they played 5 backups and they were plus 10 in turnovers in those games. There was problems last year. Now you lose 4 offensive linemen to the NFL. You lose your long-term head coach who takes some of your best defenders with him to Michigan. Your defensive line is really young. Your offensive line is really inexperienced. Your wide receivers aren't necessarily, the most elite of the Power 4 level. They're not going to carry you through some struggles. And I still have questions about the cornerback room as well, just the depth there. So there's a lot I don't like about this team. I lean under, but not sure I'll get there, but I'm no interest in Utah to win the conference or for futures perspective.
This is just one of those teams, and this happens a lot in the Big 12 podcast. So I'm going to apologize for about 6 more teams. The mathematics don't fit the direction of where the team is going.
Yeah,
right.
Agreed. All right, let's move on to Kansas State Kansas State is 16 to 1 to win the conference. Win total 8.5, juice to the under. Colin Klein comes in hoping to rejuvenate this offense, and I think it was a great hire.
Oh, absolutely.
And he recruited Avery Johnson, so I think he's going to be able to get the best out of them. Now, there are questions on this team, right? Like, they lose a lot. I mean, we can start on the offensive side of the ball. They lose their center to the NFL. Big loss. He was very good. And now I'm hearing their starting center might be Morris from Akron. Oh, God. That could just
what an upgrade.
So, they lose a couple other offensive linemen. Who cares about the right guard? But the left guard was there for 3 years. So there's some questions on the offensive line. I was hoping, you do have your left tackle back, Pastor, who's solid, but the rest of the unit, there are questions. I don't mind the left guard from Colorado State, but I was hoping that Fitzpatrick, who got hurt last year from Ohio State, was supposed to be the starter at tackle. Going into the year, he got hurt, never played, but I'm hearing he's just too far away. So I don't know. It's going to be a super inexperienced offensive line outside of left tackle. Mm-hmm. The wide receivers, I think, can be okay, but you do lose a lot of talent. This is going to come down to what can Klein scheme up, and can Avery Johnson finally take that next step consistently on this offense. The defense, I'm pretty worried about. I mean, they lost a lot. And in this conference, you have to be able to stop the run. It's not like the old Big 12. You got to be able to stop the run in this conference, especially against the top teams. Kansas State couldn't do it last year. And, I mean, they lost 6 multi-year starters. And I look at who they're relying on this year. It's pretty scary. So the defensive front is a concern. It's a rebuilt front 7 on D. I already mentioned they lost Romaine to Texas Tech, their best linebacker. I like their secondary. They have some guys back in the secondary, Rich and a couple other corners. I like some of the additions that they brought in. So I think their secondary will be fine, but I'm worried about that front 7. Having said that, I do, and by the way, I do think that you're going to see a lot more 12 personnel. Like even though it is Colin Klein, because their tight ends are very good, and it'll help with maybe the tackles as well. Lincoln Cure, I think, is going to have a big year. And then Garrett Oakley is a stud.
I think Oakley might be questionable right now, but yeah, you're right. Cure is making some buzz.
Yeah. And then Jackson's back, a running back. He came on at the end of the year. But it's the offensive line for me is the question. Like center, right tackle, what's going to happen there? And then the front 7, there's just questions everywhere. There's just young kids at linebacker, and then a La Tech transfer. How's it? The D line is very shaky. So I think that their offensive line, it might be like, I hope that this freshman Oliver Miller starts at right tackle.
Oliver Miller.
Yeah,
that might be before your time, right? I keep forgetting. So. Yeah, that's
the Big O. What are you referring to? What is Oliver Miller?
Big O. Arkansas made the Final Four in 91, 92, and Big O. Oliver Miller was with Todd Day.
Oh yeah. I don't.
Yeah, sorry about that. I have not heard. And then Big O went to the Phoenix Suns. I have not heard the name Oliver Miller in quite some time. Go ahead.
But yeah, their O-line could be like an Akron center. I'm hoping it's Villarreal. Just if I'm watching the depth chart. Adams from Cal Poly could be their starting guard. He did play well versus Utah last year, but Utah's defensive line stunk. And then their offensive line is scary because I was hoping Fitzpatrick would be back healthy, but it's not. Now, I did take a flyer in Kansas State.
I knew you did because you tipped your hand on the SEC pod. Your love of Optimus Klein never ends.
I love Klein, and it's mainly a schedule play. I mean, this schedule is a joke. So they don't play Texas Tech, they don't play BYU, and they don't play Utah. So they start off Nichols, Wazoo, Tulane at home, at Cincy. I think that's the swing game for their season. If they get that, I think they're going to be in contention. Now, they're going to need BYU to trip up at TCU. We'll talk about some other potential sleepers. And then they host Houston after a bye, and Houston's playing its third road game in 4 weeks. Like, that's the time to get them. It's a good spot in the schedule. Then you're home against Kansas, at Arizona State, at Colorado, Oklahoma State at home, at TCU, which will be tough. Home against Arizona in a great spot, and then at Iowa State. That schedule is a clown show. Kansas State and Texas Tech won the schedule lotteries. Now, so I took a flyer on them to potentially get there. Schedule breaks right, win some tiebreakers. Could you? I mean, there's a case to be made that. I mean, Avery Johnson, if he elevates his game, he ends up being the best quarterback in this conference this year. So I took a flyer. I don't love it. I'm just so worried about the trenches. Any thoughts on Emo?
Yeah, my sleeper team has a better quarterback, but we'll get there. Actually, I tell you what, I came into this in the script. I was tweening on going a certain direction with this team, and you might have made my decision for me, because essentially what you've done is you've taken all this Texas A&M love you've had for the past 2 years, hopped on I-35 and went up to Manhattan with Collin Klein, right? I mean, he returns to Manhattan after previously being a Heisman finalist in 2012. To who? Lost to our friend Johnny Manziel. Shout out to Johnny. I mean, Klein, what he did at Texas A&M was extremely impressive, finishing 5th in havoc allowed. The offense just doesn't make mistakes. Top 35 in success rate. Those chains are moving. They don't give the ball up. That is a ball control with a little bit of explosive element. That is what Collin Klein is looking to do. And Joe Jackson, if you look at what he did, I mean, he averaged 4 yards after first contact, but at the end of the season, he had 6 rushing touchdowns in his final 2 games against Utah and Colorado. So can he be the workhorse here? Yeah, he can. So probably zone read left, probably a little veer left, but see what we can do. Quarterback.
You're going to block somebody. We got to see if they can block anybody.
Yeah. Well, quarterback coach Christian Ellsworth follows from Texas A&M to keep Avery Johnson, at Kansas State. That was one of Avery Johnson's big thing, is he wanted that quarterback coach, and he got him. The seniors posted 70 all-purpose TDs in 3 seasons. Protection of him is really going to be key here, and I think the offensive line is something we got to think about. Now, I asked Collin Klein at Big 12 Media Days, is Jordan Peterson, who you brought from Texas A&M, are we going to run an Elko 4-2-5 on day one? He said, no, I think in the first year we're going to run what's best for the personnel. So right now, camp is trying to determine 3-man front, 4-man front, 2 linebackers. We're trying to figure it out right now. Eventually, this is going to be an Elko type flavor.
That would be a lot. I would have a lot more confidence in that answer if I was confident in either the defensive line or the linebackers, but I'm not sure I'm confident in either group.
Well, so look, I project this above 9, and it's plus money on the over 8.5. I just got really caught up with the offensive line that they need time to develop. I mean, they're going to be heavy faves in their first 3 games before they play Cincinnati. Cincinnati is projected as one of the best offensive lines. I mean, they have no defensive line, but they can move the ball offensively on the ground. So we'll see if Kansas State can handle that. But the offensive line has got to be seasoned before the bye week against Houston. They have to be one of the best defensive lines in the conference, or else they're just going to get eaten up. And Avery Johnson has to eliminate mistakes. Collin Klein's offense demands no mistakes from a quarterback position. His turnover-worthy play rate skyrocketed to 4.6% with pressure. He had 10 fumbles. He only had 4. Avery Johnson only had 4 fumbles the previous 2 years. Last year he had 10. It's not going to work on a Collin Klein offense. And I think I'm going to mention this to you because we're going to get to Arizona State later with this travel to London. Do you buy into the fact that these teams that are playing overseas are kind of messed up for half a season when they come back? Because there is a narrative out there about that. Like, at both Iowa State and Kansas State, there's been years past that this is actually.
I think that there's something there. There has to be some residual. How much, I don't know. But I was going to mention that with Kansas State. I mean, Kansas State last year, they finished 6-6. They went 2-5 in 1-possession games. They had to deal with that. And then they lost by 3 to Army, 3 to Iowa State, 6 to Arizona, 1 to Baylor, and 4 to Utah. Like, they easily could have won 8 or 9 games. Now, you could argue that the roster got worse, but they got trucked by Texas Tech, as did everyone. But they easily could have been in the Big 12 championship if a bunch of coin flips went their way. But I do think there's a residual impact, and they had to deal with that and negatively affected their season. And that's something that Arizona State and Kansas are going to have to deal with this year.
Well, I'm going to take it over with you if you want to put it on the board, and we're going to get plus money on 8.5 if that's the number we want to go with. I'm going to tell you right now we are.
I don't mind the plus money. I'm not putting it on the board yet. I'm waiting on a couple depth chart things on the offensive line, but I lean that way with you.
Okay,
And I
so
already
I'm
have
gonna
a
go.
future.
I'm
So
gonna
I'm
go
kind
over
of
with you.
with the spirit, because if they win 9 or 10 games, they're going to have a decent shot of maybe winning a tiebreaker with BYU, and they host Houston. So, yeah, I mean, the other thing is when you take one of these long shots in the Big 12, like I'm assuming Texas Tech is going to be there, but the other players, you take a BYU. I do not want this to happen. But if Bear Bachmeier, who runs a lot, gets hurt, BYU's done, right? Like
Yeah,
they're cooked. So you
yeah.
can
I
take
mean, there's
them
no
right
wide
out.
receivers. They're just going to load the box on LJ Martin. Yeah.
Yeah. So like there could be quarterback injuries, and then with this schedule, they could easily get the 9-10 wins and then win a tiebreaker, and then boom. You can only lose 2 games though. I don't think a team in the Big 12 has made the Big 12 championship losing more than 2 games in conference play since 2008.
You know what the problem with the long shot future, and this is going to apply to me when we get to my team.
Yeah, is that you can't really hedge it when Texas Tech.
With 2 weeks left, there's going to be 12 teams in the mix, and you have.
Well, and then you get to Texas Tech, you can't even hedge. And then
you
you're
on
like
a Sunday morning in
13-point
mid-November.
dogs.
You on a Sunday morning mid-November trying to figure out Big 12 tiebreakers is like I've never seen you in such excruciating pain in my life.
Oh, I hope I get to experience that again. All right, let's move on to the Cougs. Houston, very, very successful year last year. They finished 10-3, although they did finish 6-1 in one possession games. See if there's potential regression coming in that department. Win total over 8.5, juiced slightly to the under. They're sitting at 16-1 to win the conference. They bring a lot back. Top 20 in experience, top 20 in returning production. Connor Wegman is back at quarterback. They have a very exciting freshman behind him as the future of their program. You might see him in some packages, and he's going to be a name to remember in the future. But this team, look, they were very good last year. Now, they won a lot of close games, but you look at who they lost, right? They lose their center to Colorado. It's going to start at Colorado. Hunter wasn't anything special. They lose their right tackle, Merriman, who's okay. They lose their left guard, Wyckoff, who's okay. And they go out in the portal. They get Hurst from Tulane, Boswell from Toledo, and Terrell from Miami of Ohio. Yeah, well, that's I'm just talking the offensive line first. They are excellent. They allowed those 3 allowed 4 sacks and 1,300 snaps last year. They are stepping up in class, but I've watched a lot of all 3, and I think that they're very experienced, and they should slide in. And I think their offensive line has now upgraded because their
offensive line wasn't great last year. Their pass blocking was bottom 10.
Yeah, so. Left tackle Ebasele is still a question mark. He got better as the year progressed, but they bring back Angelo at right guard. He didn't allow a sack all year, and I think they upgraded the other 3 positions. So I think their offensive line could be a strength. Now, they lose Dean Connors, who I thought was always underrated, but they bring in Mekhi Hughes. You lose your Johnson at wide receiver, but you bring in Trent Walker from Oregon State, who I think is extremely talented route runner and wide receiver. So, they addressed every need. Now, you lost your Koziel to the NFL, your tight end. You do bring in Patrick Overmeyer from UTSA. I do think there'll be a slight drop there. And Koziel was really good for them in a safety blanket. But this offense, I think, got better. They used the portal very intelligently. The biggest question I have with this team is on the other side of the ball, you lose 3 of your – so you lose, a linebacker in Garner, but you bring in a linebacker from Ole Miss. You lose your nickel back in Brown, but you bring in a nickel back, White from Tulane, who's very good, knows the system. I think you're fine there. The 3 guys that I'm most worried about on this team is you lose McCutcheon at corner, Walls at D end, and Allen at defensive tackle. All 3 of those are on NFL rosters. They were excellent. So in order to replace them, they went to the portal again. And these 3 guys, I think, are the key to this team. You bring in Porter from Oregon. The kid from Yale, the defensive tackle, his name is escaped. It's like Edegbare. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. I can't think of his name now. But he has potential. And then they bring in this cornerback who I really like, Mayo from Stephen F. Austin. If Mayo and Porter hit, then you got to really love with this defense that has a lot of other experience elsewhere. But that's really what I'm worried about. Can they replace the production of Walls, Allen, and McCutcheon? The key, the The intriguing part about Houston at 16-1 is they get Tech. They have to go to Texas Tech, but they get them early. And then there were questions about, is Hammond going to be healthy? Is it going to be Kirk Francis? But like I said, Texas Tech might not even need to throw it. And it looks like Hammond's going to play, which makes their future a little less intriguing because they go to Texas Tech, they go to Utah, they go to Kansas State. So it's a tough road slate. I mean, even going to Colorado and going to West Virginia, those aren't easy trips.
Back to back West Virginia.
Back to back late in the year, and it could be cold, right? You could be dealing with weather.
And Baylor should be a corpse though at the end of the year. So
yeah, you could benefit from that, but you would like to maybe go to Baylor. Now I will say Houston's been very good on the road. They have a great staff. This team is going to be formidable. What are you seeing with the Cougs?
For some reason, my numbers make this an underplay.
Same.
Yeah. So what did I say a couple teams ago? The mathematics are not lining up with the direction that I think the team is going. Connor Weigman finally figured it out. And now they have a 5-star, what is he, a true freshman, Keyshawn Henderson, this kid is supposed to be the next thing of all college football. And they're saying
number one in his class. Yep. Crazy.
He's going to get short yardage and goal line packages, which is what I read from the latest practice reports. I mean, Amari Thomas at wide receiver, 2.4 yards per route run. Insane. Mekhi Hughes is back after 1,300-plus yard seasons at Tulane. Oregon season.
And he got the rest last year. He didn't have to do anything.
Yeah, and he should be completely rested. The offensive line snaps that they brought in, over 5,500 of offensive line snaps experience. That's top 10 in FBS. The defense ranked 35th in havoc, 19th in PBUs. I don't expect that to fall off. There's only 4 Big 12 games at home. And, some of their travel last year, I mean, you said 6-1 in one possession games. I think I had like 5. It doesn't matter. They were really good in one possession games. Does that flip? And frankly, what was their toughest road game last year? Right.
Their schedule, they benefited from the schedule last year. I mean, they didn't play BYU, Utah, Iowa State, or Kansas State. They played 5 of the bottom 6.
Yep.
They lost at home to Texas Tech, West Virginia, and TCU. I mean, look, they beat Stephen F. Austin. That's when they saw that kid Mayo, by the way. Rice, Colorado with Staub, Oregon State in overtime. They were down 14 in the fourth quarter. Oklahoma State, who was maybe the worst team in the country. Arizona by 3. Field goals, time expired. Arizona State by 8. Tyson and Levitt were hurt. UCF by 3. They were down to whoever they were throwing out a quarterback. And then Baylor by 7. And then LSU by 3 in the bowl game against backup. So,
I can't throw shade on Willie Fritz, and I can't throw shade on Slade Nagel. I can't do it. But this road slate last year was easy.
Yes.
And their toughest game was a 3-point win at UCF. Now, Texas Tech, Kansas State, Utah. The team is ascending in one way. The math is ascending down, and the schedule is ascending down. So you need 5 losses to capture this under. Who's that going to be? At Texas Tech, at Kansas State, who's off a bye, at Utah. After that, there's coin flips against Cincy, at Colorado. It's I should take it under.
Yeah, I can't get that. I'm not far. I'm not off enough to where I want to bet this, and I'm not fading Fritz in this.
I feel like I'm holding a 16 against the dealer's 20, and I'm too much, or a dealer's 17. I'm too much of a pussy to take a hit.
Yeah, but there's second year of the coordinators too. There's and Fritz always is building. So but here's the thing: this year their schedule is much trickier. You go to Texas Tech, you go to Kansas State, who's off a bye, and it's your 3rd road game in 4 games. You go to Utah, and that's your 8th straight game of the season.
Yeah.
And then there's also a lot of variance at the end of the schedule because you play Cincy, Colorado, West Virginia, and Baylor. All 4 brand new offenses and brand new quarterbacks. Have any of them quit? Or any of them ascending? Did any of them figure it out? There's a lot of variance in those last 4 games with the travel aspects. You could get gifts, or some of those teams could be ascending. So for me, Houston is a pass.
By the way, before you say, it's pass or under. But the one thing I was going to say, I asked somebody, one of the coaches was at Big 12 EDAs, one of the assistants, and I said, "Does Willie care about the Georgia Southern game?" And the answer back, because Willie Fritz used to coach there, and the answer back was Willie would care about it if they were still running the triple. So I thought maybe that could have been a spot where they, either cared too much or didn't pay attention. But it turns out that Willie Fritz is just upset that they don't run the triple. Maybe they take it out on him. I don't know. But to me, that's fascinating because that is.
Well, they're going to Statesboro the week after playing Texas Tech.
How did that get lined up? Is that one thing where Willie's like, I want to go to Statesboro, like see, catch up with family and stuff? Like, how did that get on the schedule between Texas Tech and UCF?
Yeah, that's amazing. All right, let's move on to the TCU Horned Frogs. I have an inkling. I swear on everything. I haven't looked at the doc.
Yeah, I'm going blind. You knew this was coming.
I think that this is where you're leaning with TCU. I'm leaning them I'm looking at 7-1 to make the Big 12 title. But TCU, their win total is sitting at 6.5, heavily juiced to the over. Implied
it's taking money.
Yeah, it's taking money. 17-1 to win the conference. 7-1 to make the Big 12 championship. There's a lot. I think there's a lot to like about this team. Gordon Samus, I really like. It's gonna be a completely different offense. It's more pro style. You're gonna see more motion, more under center, more varying formations, multiple tight ends, and he runs a clean ship. I mean, you go back to what they did at UConn last year, it was pretty amazing. Now they did lose Josh Hoover to Indiana, but they go and they get Jaden Craig from Harvard, who, if he didn't transfer, he probably would have been drafted late. And if he has a good year, he's probably going to get drafted. He has an NFL arm. He can move. I think he fits well in this offense. Now, look, you got to ask the question, he's stepping up in class, so it might just be too fast for him. But I like the fit with him and Samus. This offensive line, I also think, should be better. There's a lot to like about this offense. The questions that I have are this defense. So you lose 2 linebackers to the NFL, 2 very good linebackers, and you're replacing them with Carroll, who's just it was a backup last year, 200 snaps, and then a Va-Tech transfer who was a backup at Va-Tech. So you're going from 2 NFL linebackers to and then you're the hybrid in Avalos' defense, who was Deal, who's also signed in the NFL. You're going to be hoping Chapman can probably take that role, but that's an important role. And then you lose your nickel in Glover. You're hoping a sophomore with 100 snaps last year can take over. You lose a 3-year starter at cornerback in Canada who signed with an NFL team. You're hoping, a Gil Jackson, who I do like. I think he's going to be a stud, but he only had 100 snaps as a freshman. They think he's going to be CB1. The biggest loss is Bud Clark at safety, a 4-year starter.
Played the national title game, yeah.
You don't replace him. They bring in Fields from La Tech, who they're hoping can replace him, but that's Bud Clark is on the Seahawks. That's going to be a drop off. So the defensive line has a lot of depth and a lot of returning pieces. You get Glover and Johnson, who I really like at safety back. I think Gil Jackson's going to be good at corner, but there's just these pieces at linebacker, Bud Clark, the other corner, that do worry me about this defense having a big drop off. But I like the fit for the offense. I know that they lost McAllister at wide receiver, but Dwyer does come back. Payne at running back flashed at the end of the year. I think so they need some of the young receivers to step up, guys like Small, Ezekanma. But I like this offense. I like the fit. I like that they're doing something a little different. They're going to be hard to scheme for. They're not going to turn the ball over. They're not going to beat themselves. So, and this is a team that's building differently. Dykes is just leaning into retention and high school recruiting. So you also got to hope that some of these guys, this is Dykes' team now. Some of these younger guys that they're counting on, they need to hit because they're not going to the portal and bringing in a ton of guys. They're relying on retention and development. So if they can hit on that this year, this team could be dangerous. My questions are, before you make your case, they've gone back-to-back. They quietly have won 9 games in back-to-back years.
Right.
They go to Dublin to start the year. Is there a residual impact? And they need to stack wins early because the finish is pretty brutal, right? They go to Arizona, host Kansas State, host Utah, go to Texas Tech. But they get 5 Big 12 home games. They get the worst teams early. They host BYU. So there's a nice runway when you're breaking in some of these new defenders, you're breaking a new offense to really build momentum. And then hopefully, you can pick off Utah and then, win at Arizona and then really put yourself in position to get to the Big 12 championship game. I think they're worth a look as a flyer. You agree?
100%. I am betting them. What did I get them? 22-1. Not at DK, another place. So 22-1. I am taking them to win. I also saw it at DraftKings plus 650 for them to make the Big 12 championship game.
7-1 you can find out there too.
Yeah. So, you were mentioning schedule. Once they get back from Dublin, they leave the state of Texas twice. So you're right. There is a runway. If they can somehow run a couple laps around Bill Belichick and get back without, any fatigue or anything, they're going to be fine. This Jaden Craig thing is very interesting because before I went to Big 12 Media Days, I wanted to go do a deep dive into his numbers. So I looked in what his turnover-worthy play rate was. Mm-hmm. In total in his time, 54 big-time throws, 26 turnover-worthy plays. That's great. His turnover-worthy play rate, 3%. Then last year, on 120 opponent blitz, that turnover-worthy play rate went from 3% to 3.8%. He is unfazed by hands in his face. He is unfazed by a dirty pocket. You go the year before that, because this is his 5th season. He doesn't care if there's pressure in the pocket. It's one of the more remarkable things that I've seen in a quarterback. And then Sonny Dykes gets up there and talks about the progression of finding Jaden Craig, knowing who Jaden Craig is, and that they had targeted him a long time, and a lot of other Power 4 programs wanted Jaden Craig also. But what made the difference was Gordon Samish, and which Sonny calls Gordy. And I've got it Gordy in my head because he said Gordy about 120 times up on the podium. And the question to Sonny Dykes was, how did you find Gordon Samish? And he said, one night we were in a hotel on a Friday night getting ready for a game on the road, put on UConn, watched Joe Fagnano, and saw just like the best offense, the most crisp and best offense we've seen. We dove into their tape multiple times over the year. So we had to watch UConn religiously on a weekly basis. Gordy was the number one target, and then they went after Jaden Craig, and they got him. This is going to be such a different offense than Josh Hoover. This is not going to be a high-risk throw. They're going to be able to run the ball a little, and Jaden Craig is going to make great decisions in this pocket. Once you get past that, Samus, he's going to bring that UConn flavor here that he had before. Physical offense, running back Jeremy Payne, 3.8 yards after first contact. Protection of the football after 42 lost turnovers in the past 2 years. Dykes has mentioned that is the most important thing. They're focusing all camp on protection of the football. I do have a little, regurgitation with what they're losing on defense under Andy Avalos, especially the linebacker group. It's nasty. The defensive line should have some success in stopping some rushing, but this could be a different team by the time they get to the end of the season. Yeah. And I've seen Sonny Dykes hit home runs on coordinators before, and he is more confident about this than he has been in years past. So I think TCU is hella improved. They're not going to make as many mistakes. They're going to be able to run the ball, and they have a defensive line that can stop the run. Hopefully the linebackers can contribute. And if they are fine and not fatigued after Dublin, which we'll be watching very closely, at UCF, at Arizona, the rest of the games are in the state of Texas, plus 650 is probably the more realistic bet, plus 7-1 to make the championship game. I've hit on these guys before, and that number, the season they went to the national title game, was 20-1 to win the Big 12. I'm hitting it again. 22-1 TCU. There's 20-1s out there. I like the Frogs.
By the way, that game that he was watching, that Dykes was watching, was Friday night, UConn, Georgia State. I had Georgia State plus 7.5. I was out to eat with a friend in town. We had it streaming on the dinner table on my phone. Georgia State was down 34-13 with 6 minutes to go. Zach Gibson, whose career is now over, 7-year career for Zach Gibson, who I think finished at FAU last year. He's at Akron, Georgia Tech, Georgia State. Zach Gibson comes in, leads a touchdown drive. It's 34-20. And then they get the ball back with 2:40 to go at their own 6, and he leads a 94-yard touchdown drive. Score 34-27. They do an onside kick. They don't get it. UConn has the ball 4th and 1 at the 20 and they're up 7 with 21 seconds left. And I'm like, oh my God, they're going to kick a field goal to make it 2 possessions, but they decide to go for it, and they gained 3 yards, and then the game was over. One of my favorite covers ever.
And Sonny Dykes was
watching.
Dykes is at a Hampton Inn sitting on the edge of his bed, like cheering with you.
Amazing. All right, let's hit the Arizona Wildcats to close out part 1. Arizona win total is sitting at 7.5, slightly juiced to the under, 22-1 to win the conference. They do bring back Noah Fafita again. Need him to stay healthy, by the way. He has stayed healthy, but backup situation pretty ugly. They did get Mahdi back at running back due to the ruling, and Riscano as well. And they also get back one of their linebackers in Harris. So they get a couple of starters back due to the 5-5 ruling. Any quick thoughts on Arizona before we dive in here a little bit?
I mean, 23 new players after 38 moved on. Running back, wide receiver, linebacker groups entered the season with the least amount of experience. There's a lot of problems here. And just to get it out, because we need a betting deliverable. I project 7.4, total 7.5, juice the under. So this isn't a play for me whatsoever. And there's some key positions that are really missing what Fafita needs to get the job done.
Yeah, I've wanted to like this team because of Fafita, and then I wanted to not like this team because they lost 5 defensive backs to the NFL. Yes, 5. They're pair of 3-year starting safeties in Smith and Johnson. They were drafted in the 4th and 5th round. Stooks, who I love, their nickel/safety. He was a 5-year player for them. He got drafted in the 2nd round. Garnes, he got signed as an NFL free agent. He was a corner. He was replaceable. But Dansby also got drafted at the other corner spot. 5 defensive backs on Arizona, all on NFL teams. 4 of them drafted. So who are they replacing them with? You got, Boss from Wyoming, Malcolm Hartzog from Nebraska. He's okay. Austin from Oregon. Your nickelback, you're hoping Hunter steps up. And then Cole, it's a big, 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 big drop-off. You do at least get Harris and Brown back at linebacker. You get Trey Smith back from injury on the defensive line. But the other defensive line, there's questions. So, yeah, I think this defense could take a big step back, because how do you not after losing 5 defensive backs to the NFL? On the offensive side of the ball, you bring back your right guard and your right tackle along with Fafita and Mahdi and Riscano. You bring in Henning to play center to replace a center that got signed by an NFL team. He's okay. You're moving Rhino to guard from tackle. He played a little bit there last year. I think that's the smart move. Your left tackle is going to be a question mark, though. It's probably going to be Lato. He played there last year as a freshman a bit, but I'm not in love with the offensive line. You lose your top 2 receivers. I know Spivey and Hunter are back, but I think bringing in Cole Rusk is an upgrade at tight end. But, yeah, I think this team got worse, and it starts with the secondary. I project 7.4. They tried to address it in the portal, and maybe they strike gold. They added 7,000 snaps in the portal of defensive backs. The special teams still a major question. But the one thing that you could – and by the way, they forced 31 turnovers last year. They had 22 interceptions, 2.5 takeaways per game, number 1 at FBS, plus 18 turnover margin. You could say regression, but – it also is just, hey, you don't have 5 NFL guys in your secondary anymore. The schedule is also not forgiving. Go ahead.
I was going to say the schedule. If they don't get it figured out in these groups you're mentioning, look at the last 5 games. No thanks. Yeah, they play at Texas Tech, TCU, Utah, at Kansas State.
Arizona
say
State.
What you will about Arizona State, but it's still a rivalry game. But I mean, that is a stretch.
Yeah, I mean, starting You got to go at West Virginia. Never an easy trip. From Arizona, that's a brutal trip. And I think West Virginia's going to be really improved. You're going to beat Iowa State, but then at Texas Tech, L. Home against TCU late in the year, could be an L. Home against Utah, at Kansas State in a very tough spot, and then home against Arizona State, the rivalry. And that's like 5 of the top 6, top 4. So I wanted to bet. There's 3 reasons I wanted to bet the under, reasons I want to bet the over, and I'm right in line with the market. So it's a pass for me. All right, that'll wrap up part 1 of the Big 12 betting preview. We covered Texas Tech, BYU, Houston, Utah, TCU, Kansas State, and Arizona. In part 2, we will cover the remaining 9 teams, some really interesting, wide, high variance teams with a lot of change. We'll start with Oklahoma State, which is North Texas. Thanks for joining me, Colin. Thanks to our producer, David. Most importantly, thanks to all of you for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe, tell a friend, tell an enemy. Leave a 5-star review. A lot of you already did, but we're doing giveaways, like giveaway hats. We're going to give away free futures on our recap episode when we're recapping all the futures, me, Colin, Duck, Breeze, next week. We'll be back with part 2, and we'll have the ACC plus Notre Dame and UConn. We'll be recording that tomorrow, but stay tuned. Part 2 will be out in just a few hours. Catch y'all later. Cheers.
Peace out.